Despite all the rumors, the Flames have the pieces to stay competitive thanks to a reliable defensive core anchored by Dustin Wolf. We're going to explore the future without some of the Flames' potential trade pieces on this edition of Locked On Flames.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome. This is Locked On Flames, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The wild card round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. So visit FanDuel, an official sports book partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. Exploring possible trades on the horizon for the Flames, what the roster might look like after those trades are reality. Also look back to last Saturday's Calgary at Pittsburgh game. The Flames finally win in 2026 and end a 4-game losing streak. What went wrong? What went right for Calgary? And then my perspective on a recent quote from the Flames Talk show with Pat Steinberg talking about Gavin McKenna wanting to be a Calgary Flame, something that stood out to me listening to that. I'll share on this edition of the show. My name is Ryan G. I'm a lifelong play-by-play broadcaster and have been a fan of the Flames for a few decades, since Peter Marr was my soundtrack to the 2004 Stanley Cup final run against the Tampa Bay Lightning. What would a future look like for Calgary without some of the pieces that are most likely still to be traded from this Flames team that right now is still so far away from actually being in the National Hockey League playoffs, let alone being a contender in the NHL playoffs? There's been no major deals so far for the Flames, but at the same time, what is likely to happen versus what has happened, I think, is the bigger story. And so what we know at this point is that Calgary is a defensive team based on the fact that there's not any offense being produced by Calgary by and large. Bottom of the league in goals scored, especially a lack of scoring on the road. Even the fact that Calgary ended that 4-game losing streak against Pittsburgh still only needed 2 goals in order to do it. And I think part of the reason that Calgary was in the middle of that 4-game losing skid is because Dustin Wolf had been overworked. And as we'll hear later on in the show, Devin Cooley played in net on Saturday, got the win over the Penguins, and snapped Pittsburgh's 6-game winning streak. But we'll hear about exactly what the ailment was that kept Cooley out of the lineup. But Wolf is the cornerstone. Cooley's recently signed a 2-year contract extension. My understanding is that takes a place to begin at the initial part of next season, meaning the 2 years starts with the 2026-27 season. So regardless, 2-year extension. Devin Cooley is not the long-term plan in net for Calgary. Dustin Wolf is, and I should be transparent. Spotrac is where I'm getting a lot of this contract information. And if you look at the free agents tab versus the contracts tab, the end date seems to coincide differently on certain pages, meaning it sounds like if I say Dustin Wolf is signed through 2032, get the impression that means the 2032-33 season. Regardless, it's going to be a plus or minus 1 as we talk about these contract scenarios. But Mackenzie Weegar is locked up until 2030. So is Kevin Ball. And so right now, one of the best things that's happened to Calgary is Jan Kuznetsov is playing well for Calgary as one of those defensive pieces. And because of that, Calgary, if they were to lose Rasmus Andersson, would still technically have their top defensive pairing in place with Weegar and Kuznetsov. So then you look at who would fill the void if Rasmus Andersson is dealt. Off the World Juniors performance, arguably one of the bright spots in the young talent for Calgary is Zane Parekh. And while he has those 2 points in 12 NHL games so far, it seems like he would be a logical choice to potentially fill Anderson's spot. Hunter Brustevitz is playing well, has missed, I think, 1 game since we started with me in the hosting chair for Locked On Flames, and has been with the Hanley line or Hanley pairing in that 3rd spot. So arguably, you could see Parekh sliding into where Andersson is in the lineup. And that would make the most sense from a short-term fix. What would be on the horizon? Hanging your hat on defense continues to be where Calgary has a chance to be competitive. And so if you start to move things around because Blake Coleman is dealt or Nazem Kadri is dealt, the idea that Calgary would have a dramatic fall off only seems somewhat laughable because right now Calgary still can't score goals anyway. And so you look at the points, Kadri's still at the top, Andersson's still at the top, although that's slowed a little bit over the last few games, which I'll get into in a moment. Really, Blake Coleman is the only player for Calgary that seems to kind of still be on a little bit of a rise. And so I imagine if you were able to find a trade partner for Kadri, then that gives you a little bit of leadership. I could imagine it could give you veteran presence that could make a difference both in areas like leadership and production. But at the same time, things have slowed for those pieces. Kadri has 1 point in the last 10 games as netting around 18 to 20 minutes of time on ice, no goals on 18 shots in that 10-game stretch. I think the bigger concern is trade value maybe diminishing more than you'd have any significant loss in offensive production as a whole because Kadri were to be dealt. So I think there's a natural replacement for each of those pieces. You also have a pretty center-heavy roster for Calgary, so there's a lot of guys kind of by design that can fill into one of those middle spots on the top line. Jonathan Huberdeau is not producing a ton. Joel Farabee is not producing a ton anyway. So in some ways, Calgary's top line paired with Kadri oftentimes produces from a scoring standpoint less than, say, the Michael Backlund line, which was the number 3 line in the lineups on occasion. Point being, I don't think there's a ton of drop-off potentially for Calgary. Another bright spot, too, is at least on Saturday, Connor Zary, Matt Coronato, Michael Backlund and Coronato on that line. They started to show some flashes of what Calgary's 2 best youth pieces from a forward or forecheck perspective are like. I mean, the last 3 games, you get 9 shots from Zary, and I just like seeing some volume from these guys. Coronato hadn't felt like he was shooting a ton of volume in the last few weeks, and as a result, the feeling of Calgary as an offensive for its offensive future was lacking. And I feel a little bit better about that, especially how great Connor Zary played on Saturday against the Penguins. You have Coronato through 2031. Connor Zary, according to Spotrac, which, by the way, I always thought for the longest time it was Sports Track. Spotrac is signed through 2027. Michael Backlund likewise. So that would be a kind of a bummer if Connor Zary all of a sudden starts playing great in a couple of years. He's no longer part of the Flames. But right now, I don't think Calgary would have that much of a slide with its offensive production that's already abysmal compared to the rest of the league. Connor Zary, though, talked about how his performance impacted the team on Saturday, as well as his head coach, Ryan Huska. This is all conversation with NHL Flames.
I liked our first period. I thought we did a really good job of almost, setting a tempo of the game in the first period. I think we were a hard team to play against. They picked their game up as it went along, but I thought we hung in there and stayed with it. Liked our penalty kill. I thought it had good urgency tonight, and our goaltender was good for us, especially as the game went on. I thought Connor Zary and his line, especially early on, they played really well for us. And I liked our back end, a lot of them. I thought they all did a good job tonight.
That was 3 games and not even close to 4 days. So I think it's big to come out of here with a win in that situation and grind that one out and just look forward to Columbus.
I mean, you have William Stromgren in this conversation already. Cole Reshny was the other Calgary Flames player that was part of World Juniors whenever he's done at North Dakota. We recently shared some of the farm watch for the Calgary Flames organization, and Colin Potter was on that conversation too. So I think a lot of the offensive pieces for Calgary have a better chance to be on the horizon, in addition to having some of those defensive pieces that are needed right now. How do you see the Flames navigating the right now if they were to trade 2 or possibly all 3 of Coleman, Kadri, and Andersson. I certainly would love to hold on to Blake Coleman until his contract is over. I know that there's been recent conversation about him going to Montreal, but it just feels like Coleman is a guy who supplies leadership and then the ability to score shorthanded, which if you're a defensive unit too, and as good as the penalty kill has been for Calgary, it'd be nice to keep him in a sea of red uniform as well. Calgary defeated Pittsburgh, ended the Penguins' 6-game winning streak. What went right? What went wrong? That's next on this edition of Locked On Flames. New year, big goals, and somehow even less time to cook. If you're trying to eat better but don't want to spend hours grocery shopping or meal prepping, Factor makes it easy. These are fully prepared meals designed by dietitians and crafted by chefs so you can eat well without all the work. Factor meals are made with quality, functional ingredients, lean proteins, colorful veggies, whole foods, and healthy fats. No refined sugars, no artificial sweeteners, and no refined seed oils. Just real food that fits your goals, whether it's eating healthier, managing calories, or getting more protein. Meals always fresh, never frozen. They're ready in about 2 minutes. There's no prep and no stress. Head to factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50 off and use code LockedOnNHL50 off to get 50% off your first Factor box plus free breakfast for 1 year. That's factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50 off. Code LockedOnNHL50 off. Make healthy eating easy with Factor. Thank you so much for making Locked On Flames your first listen of every day. Thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. I'm enjoying being in the hosting chair. I'm enjoying interacting with you in the YouTube comments. Thank you so much for helping us push towards 700 subscribers on YouTube. And thank you for also helping me as I navigate my experience of being a hockey fan turned hockey host. It's one of those things. Being a play-by-play broadcaster, your job is to describe the games. Being a Flames fan watching 40-plus NHL TV broadcasts now on ESPN Plus, where I'm at in the U.S., Pacific Northwest is where I'm located. It's been a lot of fun, but now to kind of start deep diving and making sure I get things right and learn a little bit of how to be analytical about the Calgary Flames. It's been fun, and I'd love to have you be a part of it, interacting with me as part of our Everydayer Club. It is yours for the taking. You can get the show ad-free through audio on your favorite podcast platform like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and an invitation to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server. Might be future watch-alongs in there as well. Let us know if you'd be interested in that in the YouTube comments. You can go to lockedonflames.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more about the Everydayer Club. Calgary gets a win over Pittsburgh, beats the Penguins. How about them apples? Getting a chance to beat the Penguins after what had been a sluggish start to the 2026 calendar year. The Flames get that win, and more importantly, looked good doing it. It wasn't one of those games where all of a sudden you're like, is Calgary ever going to win a game? Can Calgary feel like it's in control of a game? And the Flames instead were fairly dominant. It wasn't a runaway victory by any means, but Calgary did a good job of making plays. The Connor Zary steal and score was awesome. 8th goal of the season and the 4th in the past 7 games. And this is part of what I'm talking about at the start of the show, describing what Calgary would have left should they deal some of the pieces that are speculated to be leaving Calgary. Some of the best options if you're a selling team, which Calgary certainly should be. There's no reason to think this Calgary team is one that's going to compete with the Avalanche and some of the other teams that have a good shot out of the Western Conference. It'd be neat to see them make the playoffs because I always enjoy watching a playoff team as opposed to a team that is struggling. But there's a lot of upside, too, if Calgary's not able to make the postseason and add some stock into their already pretty rich draft pick selection inventory, considering the fact that they have an extra first-round pick and an extra third-round pick from the Noah Hanifin trade with the Golden Knights and then the Zadorov trade with the Canucks, I believe. So that's some pretty good stuff right there. That said, Connor Zary, pretty happy with the way that he played, getting that goal. And then his coach, Ryan Huska, happy with the physicality of Calgary and what went right at Pittsburgh. More of that from NHL Flames on X.
I kind of saw they had 3 high, and I kind of was just trying to read the play, hoping that he was going to make that, and maybe cheated a little bit, and it all worked out where he wanted to make that play quick, but I was already in the right position, so it worked out.
We haven't had a lot of success on the road this year, and on the road you have to play the game hard, and you have to play it the right way, and sometimes that means you have to get engaged physically, more so than we have been over the last little while. And you look at the Pachal hit. That's a big moment in the game for us. I felt that it brought a little energy to our team when we were sagging a little bit.
Yeah, he had that big hit from Brayden and pretty big check that kind of sparked Calgary. There was a little bit of pressure that the Penguins started to apply, especially in that second period. But at the end of the day, the Connor Zary goal, he was finding himself in front of net. There was a lot of pressure that Calgary was putting on the Penguins, and they were able to find opportunities off the rebound too. I feel like that's part of what has been plaguing Calgary when Dustin Wolf was playing so many games, 8 games in a row that Wolfie had to start. And it felt like Calgary wasn't able to get rid of the puck off any of the awesome saves that Wolf would make without finding a teammate or freezing it. And that luck bounced a little bit back toward Calgary's side when they were playing offensively against the Penguins. Also big snapping of the streak with the Coronato goal too, able to get a little bit of, I don't know, what's the word? A little bit of pestering to the veteran, Sidney Crosby. He had the cross check after the whistle in the first period. So it's cool to see Coronato getting that puck from Rasmus Andersson to score the go-ahead game winner. And Calgary gets their first victory of 2026. Certainly Connor Zary and a couple of the offensive moments, a couple of the bounces of the puck went Calgary's way for once as opposed to the other side. And then Devin Cooley, finally getting Cooley in net to give Wolf a break. Both have their upsides. Cooley's played well. He deserves the 2-year extension that he signed in December. And at the same time, Wolf needed to get off the ice. And it wouldn't disappoint me to see Devin Cooley play the game on Tuesday against the Columbus Blue Jackets, or have him play maybe even at Chicago too. I can't imagine that would be the case. It'd be cool to see Wolf get back in net maybe on the 15th against the Blackhawks, but at the same time, pretty good stuff. Calgary was 3 for 3 on the penalty kill, which again indicates that there's such good things from the way that Calgary's defensive pairings are put together. And even if Rasmus Andersson were to leave, which would be a huge bummer, like Rasmus Andersson, I'm a guy who loves to see guys end their career with the team that they started on. I'm looking at you, Jerome Iginla. That was so tough to watch him have to be dealt. But after a while, you realize, hey, it's not going to be competitive. I felt the same way when Denver finally had to let go of Von Miller, and that ended up being a positive for the Broncos because you look at a comparison, different sport, but same idea. Nick Bonito ended up becoming part of the package that was sent back from the Rams. Von Miller gets a Super Bowl with Los Angeles, and Denver gets an extra pick that ended up giving them one of the best pass rushers in the AFC. But Anderson's had 3 points in 10 games, so he's still valuable just because Rasmus Andersson is valuable for all the non-stats reasons, if you will. But if it was solely because of his start or the risk that he's going to see at the Olympics, that's something that's kind of fading, is the significance of Rasmus Andersson's peak trade value just because of how good he started in the beginning of the year, tallying as many points as he did and kind of being the bright spot for Calgary in an otherwise difficult year. He had 25 points early, I believe, for Rasmus. He's had 3 since. And so it's worth noting, but the Calgary defense continues to be great. I want to play the Devin Cooley quote because he had been absent for so long. I think it's finally good to hear exactly what he's been going through, and he explained that to NHL Flames.
I had the flu. I've had a fever for the last 5 days, and we've just been mitigating the fever with Tylenol and stuff. And then when the flu went away, it turned into bronchitis. So then my lungs, and so now they started me on antibiotics and an inhaler and stuff because I can't breathe, and I got a really bad cough. And so, yeah, it's just been like 5-6 days of just like no sleep, a ton of meds, and just sweating constantly in my sleep, like barely eating. And so I've just been in this like dream state, just like really out of it, like very loopy. And yeah, it hasn't been fun.
Devin Cooley talking to reporters after the game with a big smile on his face. He ended up getting the red blazer. They handed it out to patient zero, even as McKenzie handed him the blazer on the official Flames website. He's wearing his mask because I'm sure there's some of that flu going around because of Cooley and how he's had to kind of persevere through that. But 27 saves, faced 28 shots. That's the other thing. Dustin Wolf was getting peppered with so many shots, and I think it goes back a little bit to what I was saying earlier with all the rebounds. Realize on my graphic on YouTube, I got Boston on there. It's Pittsburgh, but you get the point. Those stats are correct. 28 shots that the Penguins sent toward Calgary, and Cooley stopped 9 of 10 in the second period, which was huge as well. So all around, great to get a win and great to get it against the Penguins to snap their 6-game winning streak. What went wrong? Briefly, there was nothing that really stood out statistically in terms of the offense being a threat, and that continues to be the storyline for Calgary. Is how are they going to be able to win games when they're producing maybe 1 or 2 goals on a great night, let alone those 3 or 4 goal games that seem to rarely happen for Calgary. Best scoring chances 5-on-5 was still Pittsburgh 22-16. High danger Penguins 9 to the Flames 4. So statistically speaking, Calgary still winning the minority of faceoffs, and a lot of their shots aren't even getting to net. Blocked shots continue to be a problem. Granted, the Flames did a good job of that themselves. And then the other piece of what I was alluding to just a moment ago is some of the trade pieces seeing their value slightly diminished. Andersson stats, I mentioned Kadri having 1 point in 10 games. Even Blake Coleman didn't play the game against Pittsburgh because he is day to day with an injury. So all of that to say, there were a little bit of pieces that went wrong for Calgary as much as they got a lot of things right in that win against the Pittsburgh Penguins. Team Tank wants Gavin McKenna, and according to a quote, sounds like Gavin McKenna wants the Flames too. I'm going to share some perspective just as a longtime radio guy that stood out from a quote from Pat Steinberg when we come back on this episode of Locked On Flames. New year, new systems. This is the time when a lot of us look at the messier parts of how we run our businesses and think there has to be a better way. And there is. Streamlining your communications is one of the quickest upgrades you can make. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Quo, the smarter way to run your business communications. Because when your team is reachable, organized, and communicating in one place, you're not just working cleaner, you're creating more opportunities to connect with customers. Your whole team can call or text from one shared business number, so nothing gets missed. Quo makes everything simple. It works right from your phone or computer, and you can keep your existing number. And Quo's smart AI tools automatically log calls, summarize conversations, and highlight next steps, so details never slip through the cracks. It's no surprise Quo is the #1 rated business phone system on G2, trusted by more than 90,000 businesses, from solo operators to growing teams. Make this the year where no opportunity and no customer slips away. Try Quo for free, plus get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/lockedonnhl. That's quo.com/lockedonnhl. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. Gavin McKenna is coveted by many, many Flames fans. He's coveted by many, many NHL fans. They all want the Penn State #1 prospect to come play for their team. And that's why hearing a recent quote from Pat Steinberg, who a lot of Flames fans rely on for information on the Flames Talk podcast, caught a lot of people's attention. The quote says, "Everything that I've been told from people that I trust quite well. He's a Western Canada guy. He's a Yukon guy and would love to play in Western Canada. I've been told multiple times that he'd love to play for the Flames. He played in Medicine Hat, 2 hours away, And I have been told multiple times that Gavin McKenna would love to play for the Calgary Flames if they drafted him. That was from the January 10th episode of the Flames Talk podcast. And the reason that it's sticking out is because I've seen on Reddit and some other places that the idea is McKenna wants to play for Calgary. I think the way that I hear it, just listening to Pat Steinberg's cadence and the context of that quote, listening to what was said before it and after it as well, part of what stuck out to me is I think the idea behind sharing that, and I don't know, this is my speculation, my perspective, just having been in the chair of a radio station talking about sports for a long time. It sounds like the idea is what Calgary Flames fans wouldn't have to worry about if they were to have a draft position in 2026 that allows them to pick Gavin McKenna, is that they wouldn't have to worry about him not wanting to play for a team like Calgary, whether it be location or whatever the other reasons might be that you wouldn't want to play for the Calgary Flames, as opposed to saying, if I had my choice, I would want to play for the Calgary Flames, because as a draft pick, you don't have that choice. But it harkens back to the idea of, Eli Manning and Phillip Rivers back in the 2004 NFL draft. The idea where I'm not going to play for you, do not draft me. I think that's what Pat Steinberg was trying to convey, less the idea that if Gavin could wave the magic wand and go to a team, that he would pick the Calgary Flames. We have a whole podcast that's dedicated to talking about prospects for the NHL, and Locked On NHL Prospects got into the conversation about Gavin McKenna and some of the best picks that are available in 2020.
Gavin McKenna, number one. He's still there. I think he's the most creative, the most dynamic player in this year's class. What he's able to do with the puck on the stick is truly special as a handler, as a playmaker, as a play driver. He loves to hang on to possession. And I think of all the players in this class, he's still the most likely to have the biggest impact for whichever team acquires him at the end of the day. But it's getting closer. The gap has tightened over the course of the past 5 months, but still Gavin McKenna, I think, has maybe gone almost underrated in some discourse that I've been hearing, because he still truly is a special talent. And number two, I've got Keaton Verhoeff, the big right shot defenseman. Look, I'm going with runway here. He's a summer birthday, June 19th. He's got exceptional tools. The shot, I think, is the best, the hardest in the class at the very least. He's a great rush defender. There's definitely still a chaotic nature to his game. There's a much lower floor, I think, with him than other guys in this tier. So I'm certainly open to any arguments for him to be lower than I have him at 2. But still, I just think that the upside that he has as a do-it-all, play-killing, aggressive guy that can just kill rushes in the playoffs, hammer in big goals, be a one-time threat on a power play, really adding dimensions to a team's game and playing 24 more minutes a night. I think if he really reaches his peak, it's just too valuable to pass up, in my opinion. And number 3, we've got Ivar Stenberg, another incredibly dynamic, highly intelligent, hard-working winger playing pro hockey in the SHL with Frölunda, a guy who's been rising up my board this year, who is a pleasure to watch and who hasn't been quite as electric at the World Juniors as I've seen him be in the league just yet. So
there you go. There's some pretty good insight from Locked On NHL Prospects. Definitely check them out. Verhoeff, Stenberg, there's some good options that are there. McKenna continues to be, as of a few weeks ago, Locked On NHL Prospects, still number 1 pick. The other thing that I thought was interesting, and I want to play this too as we conclude today's episode, is Calgary got some pretty good value, it looks like, because Locked On NHL Prospects also looked at some of their 2025 draft predictions and how they came
looking
true.
back at this range of the draft with hindsight. And then we move on to kind of wrap up the first round in this broad strokes overview. I think I swung on a lot of upside in this range. Cole Reshny was too low. He should have been higher up my board. I downplayed his skill a bit too much, and he's been excellent so far in the NCAA with North Dakota. He would be a top 21, top 22 guy on my board if I were to re-rank these today. So
there you go. There's Sebastian High sharing some knowledge that I certainly don't have about the upcoming 2026 NHL draft. What's your favorite option outside of Gavin McKenna if the Flames were not able to get him in the upcoming draft? Let us know. And I admittedly forgot that we usually do official opponent jersey power rankings on every Monday episode. I absolutely love to do it. I'm going to bring it your way on Tuesday's show as we preview the Calgary Columbus Blue Jackets game with Locked On Blue Jackets host Jay Forster. So that's coming up on the Tuesday edition of Locked On Flames. I'm Ryan G. Thank you so much for making Locked On Flames your first listen. We invite you to subscribe and follow so you can get all of the latest episodes. And if you never miss an episode, then we built the Everydayer Club for you. Get Locked On Flames ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonflames.supercast.com to join the club. For those of you on video, we send you to the first ever 24/7 national Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. And on audio, make sure your second listen is NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL. Goodbye.